Hello, families. I am going to talk to you a little bit today about some ideas for jumpstarting summer reading. So, the first thing that I really want to emphasize when we think about summer reading, the goal really being to have our students, your children, keep reading. They've been reading all year, they've been practicing their skills. And so we want to keep building on what it is that they've already spent time doing throughout the year. So continue reading and continue spending time building their reading skills. So, one thing that I want to emphasize though is that really the goal of summer reading is about enjoying reading, loving reading, continuing on with reading. The stress being a lot less on building specific skills or working on the same kinds of things that they're working on during the school year, but really hoping that they'll continue to read and build that love and enjoyment in reading. So, just as you're thinking about how you set the stage for that, I think there can be this pressure or stress, and just remember that it's really about keeping them reading. And don't underestimate the value of just that. I mean, there's so many studies that talk about vocabulary acquisition and just the amount of time that students or children are spending with texts, how much that helps them in the long run as they're just exposed to new words and new types of sentence structures, and not through anything other than spending time with books. So, a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is really about building love and enjoyment of reading throughout the summer. And I'm going to be honest, it's not particularly sort of deep rocket science, right? These are sort of this, some of these things might be things that you're already doing or that seem pretty basic, but really trying to encourage families to know that some of the things that maybe you're already doing are excellent things, and maybe there are some new things that you'd want to try. So, the thing that I would say to start the summer, as you guys are thinking about starting the summer, I would make a decision about what your reading expectations are for the summer, and then really start that summer out by laying that out with your children and saying, this is what we expect and this is how it's going to look. So, right at the front of it, so there's really, it's clear, and then you can follow through with that expectation. So, some things to consider that I think go a long way would be introducing and setting a daily quiet reading time. This would be a time when really every day there's no devices on, there's no screens, no music. Really just a time when the family, whoever is home at that time, is quietly spending time reading. And so, yeah, that would be, I mean, most important or most successful. This tends to be successful when parents engage too, right? That they model that behavior. It's incredible how much modeling has an impact on children. And so, a time when everyone is slowing down, quieting down, and really reading. So, depending on the age of your children, right? Maybe this is something that can be done entirely independently. But with younger kids, another opportunity when we say quiet, this could be a time when they're sitting with a parent and reading with a parent. But if there is a clear expectation that there's 15, 30 minutes, even an hour, maybe, depending on how your children are as readers, to really everyone stop and quietly read, and the impact of that time being set. And again, setting that up from the outset is really going to go a long way for keeping students engaged in that. I think a weekly library time is another opportunity for continuing to keep that excitement going about books. That every week, knowing that there's going to be a time to be continuing to get new books. Now, as it stands, I'm here coming to you virtually because we have limitations, right? But whether that is because the libraries open up and we're able to do that, or it's because, or whether it's through these virtual means, right? And so there's electronic books that are available through the library. There's curbside pickup at a lot of libraries where you can request the books and then go pick them up. So even if that means that once a week, everyone kind of comes together and is taking some time to pick new books. But again, the more that you can keep a steady flow of new books coming in, replacing the old ones, and keeping there this sort of excitement about our weekly library date, again, whether that's in person or virtually, can go a long way. And then so again, these things maybe aren't deep, but I think it can really support the excitement about reading. So the third thing that I'm going to talk about is this idea of a family book club. So something where every member of the family is reading a book together or reading a book and then coming together and conversing, talking about that book. So, uh, how would that look? What would that look like? How would that work, right? So, this idea of picking a book, first of all, that you think would engage a wide variety of ages, depending on what you're looking at with your kids. And I think there are books that you can find that would really draw all ages. And I'll include a list of books as well that you guys can take a look at, but really a little bit of research. And I think don't underestimate the power that older kids do like still reading some of these books that maybe seem beneath them, but they do enjoy it. And that younger kids, even if maybe they don't understand every part of it, they're engaging in something special with the family. They like the connection, and they will continue to get exposed to new vocabulary. So that even if it's not a perfect fit for every one of them, if we're doing it together, there's a lot that can happen anyway, even if, maybe it's above or beneath somebody. So things to think about if you were to do a family book club, I would again talk about setting expectations about how much of that is going to be read, who is reading independently or maybe reading with a parent, and how you would continue to be working through this, right? But again, making it clear how everyone is going to be participating, even maybe setting a schedule for the book. So if you have a child who's reading more independently, telling them that, this is kind of your deadline for this much of the book, this much, and then they can continue to keep reading as they go. But the biggest thing, if you were to do a book club with a family, I would say is work to make it special somehow, whatever that looks like for your family. So we'll talk a little bit about how you can do that as you go, and then I'll talk about kind of a big finish idea as well. So things that you can do along the way that I think can go a long way. There's so many resources online. So I think if you've picked a book, you could look for things like coloring sheets, crossword puzzles, word finds. And I think even if you're not having access to a printer, there's things that you can do, and you could kind of write down your own copy of them, and just see what's available. But I think even drawing pictures as you're going, imagining how you could write a poem about what you're reading, or write a song about what you're reading, or ask your children to act out things that have happened, right? Create a mini play about a chapter that they've just read. But I think there are these more enrichment activities that can garner a lot of excitement and make something seem really special. That I don't think you would take a lot of extra effort or even extra materials, right? But just continuing. And I think it comes from you as a parent, this idea of getting that excitement in place as they're going. And so sometimes even maybe they're coloring what they're hearing while you're reading to them, right? And drawing that picture as they go, and it kind of gets them engaging in the fun of it. So the other thing, and I've kind of hit on this already, but I also encourage you not to underestimate the power of reading aloud with your children. And Mrs. Taylor is going to present a lot of information about that in terms of questions that you might ask while you're reading together and the power of reading aloud. But reading with your children, especially if you're doing kind of this family book club, can really get excitement going for them. It becomes the special part of their day as they're reading with you, and they can reflect, and there's physical closeness that happens when you're reading together, and sort of this emotional connection as well. And so again, these are some of the things that you could do along the way, but I think the big finish, I'm calling it, right? So if you're doing this family book club, I think something that can go a long way for making it exciting is, how do you end it? What is that moment when everyone has finished the book and you're coming together for your big discussion? So all of the things that adults tend to do for book clubs, I think, can be just as special for children. So if that means going to a restaurant, maybe someday if they're open again, but right, go to a restaurant and it's a special time that you've set aside where you're going to have a book club conversation. Or even at home, thinking about a way that you can make something special, something that wouldn't be a part of your regular day. So whether that's a special meal or a special dessert, where you come together and say, it's book club time, and now we're going to come and have this party, basically, right? Where there's some kind of special food being provided. Depending on the book, maybe there's something from the book that you could make and say, this is inspired by something that they ate in the book, or inspired by where the book is set. If it's set in a unique location, what is the food that maybe, and the music maybe that comes from that location? But thinking about a way to make it special so that they're kind of looking forward to this big finish where you all come together and talk about the book, discuss the book together, and really continue to foster that love of reading. So they are working all along to get to this point, and then you get to the end point and have this special conversation. So I do think, think about a way that whatever book you select, how could you make that exciting and something that they look forward to as they get to the end. Um, so things, I mean, you, as you're reading a text, maybe are thinking of these questions. And again, Mrs. Taylor will hit on some things that you can ask along the way, but things that I think are great questions that you could ask as you finish a book and are trying to have a family discussion about it. I mentioned this earlier, but I think, again, setting expectations goes a long way, especially if you maybe have a wider range of children. So what does that look like? Things like we're encouraging of others' answers, that we're not laughing at each other's answers, that we're not interrupting, that we do our best to participate with a positive attitude, right? These are things that, as you said, as you're getting ready to have this conversation together as a family, setting some of those expectations out so that everybody feels welcome and there's a clarity about what it is that you are asking them to do. And again, not to make it, but I do think it helps to lay some things out in advance so that all of the family members are coming in understanding what those expectations are. So, great questions that I think are open-ended, and I think that's really when you're trying to have a discussion, right? You want it to have a little bit of an open-endedness to it so that varying perspectives can be presented. And then I think encouraging people to support that with textual evidence. So as they're giving their answer to an open-ended question, what textual evidence is going to support that answer? So who is your favorite character and why? And so asking everyone to consider who their favorite character is. And then again, going back to where in the text you see these things that are supporting why you liked this character so much. Was there any part of the book that surprised you? Talk about maybe what the main problem of the story was and then how that problem got solved. And again, returning to that textual evidence. How might you change the ending? Did you like the ending? Would you like the ending to be different? And if so, how would you change that ending? And then some of those kind of big ideas that you could really dig into. What is the author's message or theme? And so maybe, depending on the age of your child, you can have that conversation where you generate the idea of the theme, or potentially with younger students, you could tell them, it seems like a main idea or a message from this book is, and then talk about where did we see this in the book? What evidence seems to support that theme? And then really relate it back to their lives. Talk about, does that message relate to you or apply to you? You could ask, if you were this character, would you have responded the same way, or how might you have responded differently? Would you make the same choices, different choices? And then I think at Nova, right, we have this common conversation about behavior, right? And so talking about virtue, this idea of where do we see virtue in the book? Was this a virtuous choice? Was it not? How might you have acted differently? And that allows for a lot of discussion as well. So these are some questions that you could really ask about any book, whether you pick one from the list that I'm going to include, or you pick another book that seems to apply or be interesting to your family. These questions are questions that you could ask and generate. And again, encouraging you to think about setting those expectations about everyone should talk so many X amount of times, or everyone should give an answer to every question that we're posing. And again, to really make it sort of a special, an event for the family. You could do, I would say, make it a not all the time, but I think you could do it a couple times this summer, or 2 or 3 times, and really make it something that your children are looking forward to throughout. So again, some of these ideas are simple. The book club is a little bit bigger, and I think some of those things you could pull and put into something that might work for your family. But the thing that I would encourage you to remember is that the biggest commodity that you have with your children is your time. I think remembering how much they love to spend time with you, how much they love things to be special with you. And so, the biggest thing when you're thinking about wanting your children to read, putting you into it, putting yourself into it will go a long way and will make it very special to them. Again, modeling is so important. Um, as a teacher, right? I know kids are watching me constantly. And so it's important to remember, right? They see you reading, they see you getting excited about it, they see you engaging in the conversation, and that gets them excited about it. So don't underestimate the power of your modeling. And then the last thing I'd say is just think about trusting the bigger picture. Again, depending on the age of your child, they may or may not seem outwardly excited about any part of this reading process, right? They might scowl or give pushback or be unexcited about it. And I would encourage you to trust that even if it doesn't appear that they are excited or willing, that there are things happening under the surface, right? That they are hearing what you're saying and that it is having an impact on them. Every day, right? They might not be jumping out of their skin at the idea of reading with you or reading on their own. But don't stress about them needing to seem excited every day. Trust that just the actions that you're taking regarding or surrounding reading are going to have an impact on them, and that these conversations that you're having with them will have an impact on them. So I think let go of a little bit of the pressure that I think as parents we inherently put on ourselves, and trust that the message and the importance that you're placing on reading is getting through to them and will have a long-term impact on them. I am by no means an expert. There's so much information online about different ways to get your children reading throughout the summer. Just a couple of ideas, but again, I would say big things would be decide what your expectations, what your reading expectations are, before the summer starts, and then set those up for your children. Tell them that this is how we're going to be spending some time reading for the summer, and then that gets them in the right place. And then again, pouring yourself into whatever you and your family have decided about reading. The more that you can give of yourself, I think the more that your children will really engage in that. So thanks for your time, and good luck for summer reading.